welcome to another live of Ken Reads. And before I dive into this letter that one of my followers has shared with me, I'm going to be bringing on board my latest team member to join the Ken Read counseling team. So I'm going to bring Megan on board right now so that way we can get this party started, introduce Megan, and get into this letter that was given to us by Lucy so we can go through it. Get this party started.
Hello.
Hello, Megan. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you very well. It's lovely to see your face now part of Instagram, which is awesome.
Yes. First time ever doing a live. So, yeah.
Well, I'm sure it'll be an interesting introduction for you. So just before we get into Lucy's letter, would you like to introduce yourself as for what you do and as part of the Ken Read, I nearly said the Ken Reads team, the Ken Read counseling team?
Yeah, so my name is Megan Brito. I'm really new to Ken's team. So I am a coach with Ken, and I support folks with recent breakups from someone who really struggled with a insecure attachment style, work through a lot of grief and betrayal off the back of these experiences. I also support folks who are wanting to work on healing their own insecure attachments as well. So that's what I do with Ken. And so this part-time role there. And full-time, I am a registered social worker with the Ontario College of Social Workers. I provide addiction counseling in my community in rural southwestern Ontario. Primarily, I do support folks that have behavior addictions. So that's the sex and pornography addictions, the gambling addictions, shopping addictions, binge eating, video game use, technology use, hoarding. I do also see folks for substance use as well, but that's what I do full time. But with Ken, I do operate as a coach, helping people recover from these, their experiences with avoidant breakups. It's so traumatic. It's gut wrenching. I've experienced it. I know firsthand what it's like. And yeah, so just it's here to give back and here to help people heal and know that it will get better. It does take time, but the pain won't be forever. And coming out the other side of it, and you grow and you learn so much about yourself and discovering life in new ways too. So yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
I do too. It is, I will say though, on the note of the breakups, awful. Like
Yeah.
just pure
Oh
hell.
my God.
So
Yeah. Oh yeah.
why don't we go into Lucy's letter that she's shared with us today? So if we're ready, let's get straight into it. So Lucy writes, I met Jill through her sister. We were friends for a year before we became romantically involved. We lived an hour away, so she visited me at my city and usually met every 3 weeks, as she did her friends. She told me I easily get bored, tired of my friends, so I don't see them too often, which I found odd, but didn't really pay attention to it. She appeared to be quite introverted and private. She never talked about her personal life. She was charming, smart, with a good sense of humor. When we first started dating, which was July of 2022, she was 29 and I was 42. We had a conversation about past, present, and future, and she said, I leave the past into oblivion, the bad and the good, everything. I forget everything. I live in the now. I told her that I found that very sad and it makes me feel that everything is pointless. To me it is, she replied. There was no love bombing, but she expressed gratitude and appreciation, at least at the beginning, and she showed promising signs of effort and willingness to meet in the middle, which I mistook as potential, I guess. During the last half part of our relationship, however, I felt that instead of her appreciating me and what I provided, she took most for granted. Okay, I'm going to pause here. I have a lot to say on Jill's presentation to start with, but I'm keen to hear what your thoughts are on this, Megan.
Jesus. Yeah. So just listening to Jill, really when she said things like, yeah, I get bored of my friends. I just, yeah, not really any connection there. I just hear a lot of emotional emptiness. Like if like inside of her it's like it's hollow, there's nothing. Not being able to even just feel fulfilled with friends and saying, yeah, I just forget things. So when I hear that, what I maybe hear more of is I want to forget what I perceive to be bad experiences. Like that's really sad. It's heartbreaking to hear that from this woman. Yeah.
I agree. Do you know, I also have to say, it might be a stretch, but I also feel like I get a little bit of addict vibes as well too, on the basis that when she's describing how she gets bored easily by her friends, it makes me think, so are you a dopamine junkie? Like, are you just rinsing through people because you're going in there just because you like the feel good, but then when that runs out, you don't feel particularly great anymore? So there definitely, to me, feels like there's degrees of potential warning signs for the fact that this is not someone who sticks around for substance. They're there just to feel good and move on.
I was going to say exactly. And addiction, whatever form it comes in, the big component, the main chemical in your brain that gets pumped out in excess is dopamine.
Mm.
That that's responsible. We refer to it as when we have positive interactions or we positive social interactions. That's the reward system. It's a loop that your brain will stay on, and when it needs excessive amounts of dopamine to feel good, it goes, what do I need to do to get that? And it leaves. So that is big with addiction. And yeah, honestly, hearing you say that and me kind of mulling over it, yeah, I just care. I'm just looking to feel good, but are you really just trying to numb? Are you just numb and you're trying to get some sense of a feeling? So yeah,
Well, Jill
a little bit.
was pretty, I was going to say, Jill's pretty explicit about leaving the past in oblivion. And, you know,
Jeez.
what a florid word to describe the past. Like, it's atomized, it's fragmented, it's just
Yeah.
don't want to have to deal with that thing right now. I can see someone here said, I've seen avoidance jump on the Eckhart Tolle stuff about living in the now. I feel like their version of living in the now is not healthy living in the now.
No, I'm laughing because we talk about Eckhart Tolle like group therapy. Eckhart Tolle, that man, like huge with it. And when we talk about living in the now, it is being present with your emotions and the whole experience. And you don't walk away from that when you've got your fill, so to speak. So yeah, and I'm like chuckling too because I have met avoidance, whether it's like coming in, I see them in like a professional sense, women I've been involved with, where they'll kind of try to use that type of language, but they'll kind of pull bits and pieces of it. Like Eckhart Tolle talks about being present. That's great. That's that self-help vibe I get too. But if you're just reading it and cherry picking what you want, it's that's you're not getting anything. Like you're not getting the value out of it. You're getting what you want out of it, but to actually grow or to say properly use that, you're not getting it. That's not how it works.
I completely agree. To
Yeah.
me, it's just classic avoidance because it's like, oh, I live in the
Yeah.
now. I forget the past. The past is selective, anyways. It's in oblivion. So it's like, that's not how being present is, because
No.
if emotionally stuff related to the past is affecting you in the present, then you need to also sit with that. But, anyways,
Yeah.
let's get back into Lucy's
Yeah.
letter. So, Lucy continues. We had fun together, laughed so much, and we talked for hours about everything except her emotional stuff. I liked that she was different from what I was used to and saw this as an opportunity to challenge myself. Okay, I'm going to just say, Lucy, that is a bit of a red flag right there. We are not looking for how to make a challenge out of a relationship, but I understand that it may have felt a little bit wacky and different, so get it, but be careful of that because that's very common. Since I felt secure enough to give her the space she needed and not meet or talk too often. Now, I'd been in therapy for 6 years, and the last relationships I had were with a woman with bipolar type 2 and a narcissist in that order. So Jill felt the most normal I dated until then. My body felt regulated and safe with her. I was thinking to myself, this can't be wrong. My body would know. So she was always so calm and laid back, and this made me think she was secure. However, much later I understood it was something like a chronic, constant state of freeze. She was basically not really feeling much, almost unmoved by everything. Okay, Megan, what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah. So first off, Lucy, no shame, no judgment. I all of everybody I talked to is that you didn't know what you didn't know, and also
Agreed.
hearing that it felt safe in my body, and I know like Instagram they really talk about your body knows, and when we talk about it, when I support folks kind of working and processing some of their trauma, we'll talk about what is the body saying. The body will hold on to that. But really is that if it's familiar, it's going to feel safe. Even if the behavior or the language or the other person really isn't behaving in a safe and way emotionally for us, our limbic system, that's that nervous system that will get regulated or dysregulated. It can't tell the difference if it's familiar. So even just hearing, Lucy, I do wonder how much emotional love and care and support you got growing up.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like? Well, because I think there was an absence of that. And, as you say, being part of the alphabet soup community, it's hard. I love that. I use it now all the time. It's we can have our own unique experiences dating, and even if you are, whether it's lesbian community, bisexual women dating other women, whatever that looks like, um, we have a lot of trauma in our community, and
Mm-hmm.
if you also just really, there's a lot of that in the LGBTQ community and dating pools. So there's, yeah, I think that even, your previous relationships, it can be hard to find somebody who is emotionally safe for us, and it sounds like that's what your body knew. So you were working with the knowledge that you had and what was familiar to you, and now you know that this is different. So a lot of empathy. I really do.
I completely agree. I want to add, Lucy, you've still made progress because you've
Yeah.
dated, just because Jill, may have turned out to be, well, I'm presuming, didn't end up being the love of your life, doesn't mean to say that you haven't made progress. Like, I mean, if
Yes.
your first partner had bipolar disorder, then you dated a narcissist, you did 6 years of therapy. It's not like that those years of therapy have gone to waste. To me,
Hmm.
when I hear a lot of this, it's like, okay, so you had some bad eggs in your dating history, but the fact that you also were conscious of like how your body was feeling in these dynamics and also thinking quite critically about like what's going on here suggests to me you're definitely improving and growing. But I will
Yeah.
say, in my experience now, this isn't based on any formal research, but I will say that for a lot of people who've suffered narcissistic abuse and emotional neglect, usually you will go, I've dated people who are like extremely dodgy with personality disorders and with all kinds of stuff going on, like mega addicts, mood disorders. Then you will start to ascend out of that and start dating people who are more maybe exclusively insecure attachers. And then after that, you'll start to find your tribe of people who are more, healthy relational people. But I think that a lot of the mainstream advice out there is like, you date a narcissist and then everything will be hunky dory off the back of it. It's like, oh no, welcome to the insecure attachers then, because that's when there's a lot of other people and nuances and differentials that come into play.
Yeah, that was well said. That was very, very well said. Absolutely. And um, you were working so much with focusing just with attachment. Yeah, I know that what you see is, fairly consistent with what's out there. So
Yeah. So let's go back to what Lucy writes. She's going, fast forward, it's November when the first discard came out of nowhere. Okay, so this sounds to me like we're going to boomerang territory.
yeah.
Um, Jill said, we are incompatible. I wish you find what you deserve. It didn't even last 24 hours. She texted me the next day apologizing, saying, I am too important to her and she doesn't want to lose me. I was waiting for her to open up like she told me at the beginning so that the relationship could progress to a next level intimacy wise. As time goes by, I will open up by myself. I didn't even know how she identified in terms of sexuality and whether she's been with men or women. The only thing I knew was she never had a relationship before. She used to just have sex with people and never spend the night with anybody. She had a stupid smirk when she talked about this, like she bragged about it. Fortunately, I was friends with her sister and knew that her mother died when she was about a year and a half years old. And her father is very strict and controlling, and she was really scared of him. When opening up was discussed, her replies were, "What if I tell you what hurt me and made me cry in the past? What will change and what will you understand about me? Or it will be later used against me." Okay, we're definitely in fearful avoidant land for sure.
Yeah.
I explained that one reason she felt safe with me, she told me as well, is because I've opened up to her ever since we were hanging out. My dating past, my family stuff, my fears. To which she said, "I didn't ask, you were telling me about them all by yourself." So I understood she wasn't curious about me. When I approached her with a need or asking for better validation or reassurance, she used to say, "I don't know how to do that," or "I never learned that." Many times I felt that she was a 10-year-old that I had taken by the hand and show her the world and how it works. There was no reciprocity. I had to initiate and plan everything. She just provided her presence every weekend. She never kept her promises from, "I'll come and watch you play tennis," to, "I promise we'll take this vacation no matter what." A vacation she later made me cancel without even blinking. Giving was transactional to her. If I did something nice for her or bought something that made me think of her, she felt she had to repay me. I associated this with guilt and her inability to be emotionally available. Yep. When our relationship ended, I realized that Jill was basically my father, emotionally unavailable, a sponsor who could only provide things that could be bought, paid for. And when everything was easy, i.e., we were behaving as kids and we did everything we wanted to, it was fine. Like my dad, he was present in those fun moments, but not when things were going into the realm of emotions, where I was made to feel like I wasn't good enough. Okay, let's take a pause here. Uh, there's a lot to say. Megan, what do you think?
Holy shit. So just listening, I hear someone sounds like this woman was more of a dismissive, leaning, fearful,
Yeah.
avoidant. When she was talking about, "I don't know how, I was never taught." Are you like, are you going to use what I tell you against me? Like, learned helplessness, the fearful, avoidant, vibe, strong. I hear dismissive because she's not. I like. There's really not that much availability with the emotions.
No.
But again, the boomerang, the back and forth. Something that really also stood out to me was, um, Lucy, I heard you say that, she was like, she wasn't even interested in me personally, and Ken, let me know what you think, but I don't think it's that she wasn't interested in you. I think that she was probably really afraid to try and get to know you more, because if the relationship ended, or she felt like she couldn't meet your needs, then she wouldn't have to risk the intense heartbreak. So when I see fearful avoidance, people come in and they say, they never really got to know me, or they didn't take any interest in me, or it was like I never really got to meet their family or their friends. It's not because they don't care, it's because they care so much and they are so afraid of what would happen if the relationship would end emotionally. Like, they can't handle emotionally, they cannot handle that breakup and how intense those feelings are. And because she has emotions, just she's not really connected to them because it's painful for her, but there is so much swimming inside. She just doesn't feel safe to connect with it too. So yeah.
No, I completely agree. I really have nothing to add to that. Just to say, like, I completely agree. I
Yeah.
think that what I'm sensing from Jill is that a lot of this is also on her terms as well too. Like, she's dictating how much intimacy she wants to give to this relationship with Lucy as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much about, like, she's ending things because she doesn't think that there's anything going on between the two of them, yet 24 hours later she's deciding, "Nope, I miss you, I want to be back with you now." This is someone who's highly emotionally dysregulated. They
Yeah.
don't know what they want. And I think this is probably how love was modeled for them. You
Oh,
know, we already
yeah.
know she's had a controlling father. So it suggests to me that the way she views relationships is control. You know, intimacy will be used against her. There's abandonment. You can't trust people. And I can see someone here says, it feels like the nicer you become into a fearful avoidant, the more it triggers their distrust and begins seeing what kindness you share as being disingenuous, to which I say I completely agree.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's insane because I think people would logically think, well, if I'm being kind, then kindness should be reciprocated. It's like, no, 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 no. People who have an insecure attachment, and not just FAs,
Yeah.
don't generally respond well to acts of kindness and generosity, especially avoidance, especially FAs, because fearful avoidance have had a lot of those acts of kindness weaponized against them.
Yes.
So I think that there is tremendous hypervigilance, but you know, it's one thing to be hypervigilant and another thing to be breaking up with people in multiple discards. And I mean, it seems like we've only just gone through the first discard for Lucy, but I mean, the fact that there was even just, you know, from the sounds of it, that was labeled first suggests to me this isn't going to be an ongoing saga.
Yes. And the other thing too is like, so, you know, you talking about they don't know what they want. And what that looks like is, so like I call it the latest addition to our vehicle, like the front in our brain. So the front part of our brain, that's our prefrontal cortex. That is our, like, that's the logic part. So that's like the decision making, how we can help to feel regulated. The logic side, that also is when we are kind and gentle. That's the forehead part of our brain. That's the big newest upgrade. But when we are dysregulated, that moves into our limbic system. That is where our attachment is stored. Part of our subconscious memory is activated there, and those behaviors. So that inconsistency, you say one thing, but you do something else. And again, Lucy, you were saying, you know, I dated somebody with bipolar type 2. I dated a narcissist. And with someone with an insecure attachment, doesn't matter what insecure attachment, that is so common. It's so consistent where the words they will want, like they will verbalize and maybe consciously go, this is what I want. But subconsciously, or when you're dysregulated, that's what runs the show. Our subconscious patterning will always win out, whether we like it or not. That's like when we talk about people going, I'm going to go on a diet, you know, I'm going to do that tomorrow. And then, you know, as they're eating donuts and, you know, waking up going, you know, I'll worry about the next day. That subconscious patterning is not quite ready to make those changes, but consciously we want something different. And if that was, again, so familiar for you, not having words and actions align, your own nervous system recognizes that this is safe. This is what I know. This is familiar. So just, yeah. So it also, it makes sense hearing your experience, recognizing that when, you know, bipolar type 2, when somebody's in a hypomanic episode, their actions are not going to match up their words. Narcissists do have an awareness of what they are doing despite what people think. Narcissists do have some understanding of what they're doing because that's how they know how to get their needs met.
Mm-hmm.
The words and actions don't align. So, and then, right, insecure attachment. They, you know, FA, she wanted to come back. She wanted to be with you, but subconsciously that it said, nope, nope, this isn't safe. This isn't okay, even though you probably didn't do anything wrong.
And
So,
I'd
yeah.
add to that by saying she would also probably know what she's doing as well. She made it very clear. She doesn't stick around with friends for long.
Yeah.
She's someone who has had
Yeah.
a habit of, I don't want to say she's intentionally rinsed and repeated, but she's
Yeah.
definitely gone through her relationships with a problematic style of behavior. But
Yes.
going back, but like, listen to her rationale. The past is in oblivion. I'm just focusing on the present. There is no room in Jill's head for contemplation,
Yes.
reflection, or even
Yes.
thinking about like the impact of her actions. It's just gotta keep moving on. It's gotta feel good and nothing else. And I think that it's deeply problematic for someone like you, Lucy, because it leaves you in this, you know, you're also becoming part addict of this experience as well, I presume, back when you were in this, because it's such strong intermittent reinforcement. Your brain's just like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Like, you know, do they want me or do they not want me? And it actually, continuing with what Lucy had to say, you know, this is, again, it feeds into what we're talking about. At the beginning of March, she had a vulnerable moment crying in my arms where she's saying, nobody has ever cared for me and treated me like you do. I don't want any of them, meaning her family, followed by an, I love you. And then Lucy says, I was sold. At the end of March, however, our downfall began. One day, she simply announced that she'd booked a holiday with a friend without talking to me first. All hell broke loose. At this point, I couldn't take the whole weight of this relationship solely on my shoulders. My anxious attachment was now at the wheel. She couldn't understand why that hurt me and made me feel unsafe. She said, oh, God. Sorry, I just saw a sentence that just fucking annoys me. I'm not responsible for you to feel safe. That's your job. Actually, let's pause here. I have my own 2 cents on this goddamn awful phrase that I shared yesterday. Megan, do you want to share your thoughts on this?
As I'm sitting here making all these stupid, just ridiculous faces, eye roll for people who are listening to this later, massive eye roll. So also context, with my job, for many years, I worked in the sector of domestic violence as well. I worked there for a long time. Want to make it clear, I'm not putting this like this is an abusive relationship. Like we're not getting into that territory, but I bring that up because there's this narrative that so many people will say, and I heard it a lot working in the field, and even addictions now, when we don't want to take accountability and responsibility for how we affect other people, we say, well, that's not my problem. And it's a crock of shit, because if we want to get technical, yes, technically, you know, we have some responsibility in how we manage our emotions, but how somebody behaves, that is a part of us as human beings. We react to our environment. We feed off each other. That's how we bond, and that's how we grow, and also that's how we get upset and offended. So hearing somebody say it's not my job to make you feel safe, no, that actually is your job. That is your job to do. And a part of it is that she, again, it's not excusing it because it's not okay, but she said that because she has no idea how to do that for herself.
No.
Another thing too, if you cannot provide yourself safety, if you are not in touch with your own emotions, if you can't explore your own behaviors, there's no fucking way you're going to do that for somebody else. You can't. You don't have that skill set. So not able to own that responsibility, she just says, not my problem. I don't know. I can't keep you safe, because she doesn't know how, and she also can't, in a kind and loving way, admit that. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I completely agree. And to add to what you said, I think when you're dealing with, like, let's paint an example. Let's say you've got someone who's got narcissistic personality disorder, and we'll sprinkle a little bit of, you know, weaponized vulnerability. Let's say this person is threatening, I'm going to kill myself if you walk out on me, as a way of intimidating and coercing someone to stay. The phrase, I am not responsible for your emotional well-being at that point is actually technically valid, because when someone is weaponizing their vulnerability in an attempt to keep you stuck in a relationship, that's when you can be like, okay, my boundary is I'm happy to think about how my actions are making me feel. But if our dynamic has gotten to such a point where after raising it with you multiple times, you continue to behave in such a way which threatens my sense of safety, emotional and mental well-being, I have every right to walk. And if we're getting into coercive control, domestic violence, then at that point, frankly, I don't need to give a fuck about your feelings. Like, frankly, that's on you to work out, because you got me to this point where we led to this. But I see a lot of fearful avoidance taking that rhetoric to an extreme in situations that are not the same. They are going into the realm where a partner is legitimately saying, I just don't feel safe when you're booking holidays with a friend without me, especially when you said to me a day ago, you love me. I'm feeling extreme confusion. This is not okay. This is not a situation of domestic violence. It's abusive, but I feel like we're dealing with the other extreme now, where it's like, if the picture I painted of the narcissist is using weaponized vulnerability against someone is a form of like coercive control to get, you know, someone who may lean a little bit too hard in their fawn response to be like, oh, but they're going through a tough time. I have to help them. What will they do without me? This is the extreme opposite. It's like extreme neglect. There's none of that sort of thinking about like, well, hang on, how is me walking out on my partner going to make them feel? How is me, you know, choosing to do this going to impact them? I think the truth is somewhere in the middle ground of these things. And yet we come up with rhetorics like, oh, I'm not responsible for your feelings. It's like, in what context are we using that phrase? Because it's partially true. It's also not, it's not entirely correct in all circumstances. And we do need to think about what we're doing to other people, depending on the context.
Yeah, and also when you were, or not you, but earlier in the letter, when Lucy was, maybe because I read it a little bit before too, but I think I misread it, maybe like a 10-year-old. Like I feel like Jill was operating at the level of a 10-year-old. And I went, yeah, absolutely, because when, again, attachment is a spectrum. We move throughout the spectrum. We have one attachment style we tend to fall back on, but it's a range. And when somebody is, we see it really anxious. I see it really fearful and dismissive as well. You not being able to recognize how you are affecting people, the emotional immaturity, you really are operating, you will be in a grown adult body, but your emotional intelligence will be of that as a child. And you see yourself as a good person. You have no idea how to have a discussion. It's always arguments, and they have to be right. And if you try to challenge them or encourage, and they can't look at their emotions in a complex matter, they can't do that. So when you try to share, this is how I feel, or please don't do that, or, do you feel any other emotions besides happy, sad, angry, and maybe fear? When that's not there and you try to challenge that, it will disrupt their whole sense of self. They will go, oh my God, I'm not a good person. And again, they don't know how to have a conversation and they can't handle that. So I feel like that was a bit of a rant. I apologize. Late ADHD brain is like, medication's wearing off. But basically, just hearing the behavior, it's a 10-year-old in an adult person's body. And right now she doesn't have that skill set to show up and behave like an adult. Again, not excusing the behavior, not saying it's okay. And she can learn that. Like, people will access counseling and therapy to learn how to grow emotional intelligence. So she's got to be able to recognize that. And just hearing that she's not, and it's not getting any better. There's not much more you could have done also. I think that's where I was going with that. But
Yeah.
Apologize for the rant, but that was just really also sitting with me about Lucy.
No, I agree. And that was actually very, appropriate given the circumstance and the context of the situation. Lucy goes back on to say, I think, something very consistent with what we've said, when she says, oh, Jill was telling me I'm not responsible for you to feel safe. That's your job. Lucy continues saying, which is basically true, but when you fuck up your relationship and don't consider the feelings or well-being of your partner, it is your fucking job. Yeah. So we're all on the same page with you 100%. Lucy continues, related to this, issues of her feeling ashamed of me came to the surface when I realized that not only am I not going to meet this friend who she decided to invite on this holiday without me, but she won't even know I exist as a person. Oh, and I think I definitely think you'll understand this. So for those of you that don't know this term, Lucy's identifying as masc, and I'm assuming that's masculine as a lesbian. So that's what's there. She says, I'm identifying as masculine, and that created problems for for Jill, since she couldn't hide me from people and made her fear of her father finding out bigger. For 3 months, the whole situation was never truly discussed because she avoided it. Every time I mentioned it, she would say things like, we'll sort it out, we'll talk about it when we're together, etc. One day I asked her, how do you show me that you are interested in resolving this? I talk to you more times throughout the day, was her answer. We usually only talked at the end of our day. When I asked her, when you are home alone, what the fuck do you stare at your ceiling without any thoughts? And how do you not even consider what I'm going through? And she's like, yes, with no follow up in terms of her reply. Our last days together were a roller coaster. June 12th, I feel happy and content in this relationship with you. I love you. We'll figure this out together. June 15th, after leaving her friend at the airport after their vacation, she came by my house. It didn't go well. I was yelling at Jill once again, shutting down and upped and left. Next 3 weeks, communication was through text because she found various excuses so as to avoid meeting up. One day after being angry because I was trying to hold a boundary about my time and schedule for the first time in our relationship, she snapped and told me to cancel our next month's vacation. Yes, the one she promised will happen. And when I planned with so much care and put a lot of effort into it, she totally disregarded all my investment in this upcoming holiday. June 18th and 20th, she attacked me and my trauma in a delirium through messages telling me that I'm obviously not doing a great job at psychotherapy and that I should consider changing psych approach or therapist. Mind you, I'm in therapy since 2017, and the best she's done is 2 hypnotherapy sessions and maybe a couple of podcasts. Projection, much? Yeah, absolutely. Jill continued by saying things like, if I was content with myself, I wouldn't have created such a fuss over this for 3 months, and that my past and unresolved issues are responsible for it. She ended the 3-day rant by saying she never witnessed a whole person asking for more time from another. They are just secure within themselves and say to the other person, come whenever you feel good and want to have a good time together. They don't demand time. Wow, very distorted understanding of what it's like to be secure. And Lucy continues, like she ever knew how a whole person is to recognize one, facepalm. So just to take another pause here, I find it interesting how when you tried scheduling something with Jill, she lost her shit and took away the holiday that she had proposed to do with you together. And it just goes back to this thing of like, this is like extreme emotional dysregulation. This is just wildly hot and cold behavior. I know it's not really my ballpark, but when I hear this sort of behavior, I mean, look, if Jill had a pretty controlling dad and this is the behavior she's exhibiting, it makes me wonder if not only has she taken on some of that terrible behavior, but I also wonder, is there something more going on here than just an attachment issue? What are your thoughts on that, Megan?
I know. I was kind of sitting here like listening. I'm scratching my head too. And again, we are not diagnosing. We cannot make diagnosis. This is just observation and kind of just thinking about it. But part of me wonders if it's maybe like if it's not narcissist. I wonder if maybe some type of even something like
Yeah.
borderline. And there's 4 different types of borderline too. There's like not just one. It shows up differently, and how BPD will affect somebody. It's also like it's a spectrum. It's a scale. There's different types. It's complex, but not having like the emptiness, this like hollowness of her just not feeling anything, a really unstable sense of self. I would think maybe, and just as you said, she lost her shit planning a trip, and even she was saying like nobody puts expectations on me, and I'm like, well, what about your boss at work? Like, you're telling me you just show up when you feel like it for family events? Like, what are you, the like, are you a princess? Like, you do run on somebody else's time. So I think also just the idea of like, I am following through on planning a vacation for somebody, and expectations. She now has expectations on me. And what if I can't meet them? She's going to leave, like the fear with it. So I also, even if there's no personality, like other personality concerns, she like not being able to feel like she can fulfill somebody's expectations. Like when I hear, people say, I can't meet your needs, it's really, I don't think I'll be able to fulfill these expectations, even though I don't know what they are and I don't really know how you're going to react. I don't think I can do it. And that's what I'm hearing. I think that's a big reason why she just lost her ever loving mind. But
I agree.
yeah.
I like, to me, it seems like when she was even proposing the vacation and all the things we could do together, to me, I think on one hand, she probably was in the moment excited about those ideas, but
Yes.
I don't think the actual processing, logistics, and
Hmm.
planning was thing that Jill had any strategy for actually navigating with you as a couple. I think it's, when I think of future faking with avoidant attachers, I feel like one part of it is absolutely true.
Hmm.
They love the idea of like, let's go on a holiday together because it sounds amazing. Great idea. Lovely. But for those of us that actually plan holidays, there can be a bit of tedious, you know, planning that goes into that. There's also logistics of where we'll stay, how we'll cope, what's going to happen. And it sounds to me like the degree of immaturity that's exhibited here by Jill is so disproportionate to what would normally happen in a regular functioning relationship. And I also want to say, going back to the BPD suspicion, is when we think of how a symptom of BPD is that feeling of emptiness, I do find it very interesting that you, Lucy, referred to how Jill was describing what a whole person would do. And it makes me think, projection. So, it does make me wonder if perhaps Jill doesn't feel very whole inside of herself at all. And it does seem to me like there could be possibility for BPD in this particular experience. And the research seems to suggest that people who have a fearful avoidant attachment style, particularly dismissive leaning, are
Hmm.
more at risk of developing personality disorders
Yeah.
compared to the other attachment groups. And it makes sense given the fact that even with the way Jill's described her background of having lost her mum when she was an infant and also having a dad who's, from the sounds of it, quite coercive in their control over her, it does suggest to me like she's kind of grown up with this cavalier attitude of like, I can do whatever the fuck I want and damn the consequences and I don't have to think about anyone. So, it does seem to me like there's a lot of that rebellion and I don't have to think about other people's thoughts and feelings.
Yep. Because I don't really hear too much emotional enmeshment like that, emotional incest. I hear like I call them not my job parents, like, oh, I don't know, or I just work here. I just work here, not my job parents. Like, I don't know, not my job. You got problems at school or you're struggling with whatever, not my problem. You're gonna figure out what you need to do. I will like put a roof over your head, give you some food, make sure you got clothes on your back, and that's it. And you're on your own for everything else. And modeling, like when we are little, how our brain develops, we we learn how to function and how to adapt based on what we are modeled growing up in our own home.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing too, I'm kind of like not literally, but kind of chuckling about. So when she talked about hypnotherapy, so I myself have had hypnotherapy done. I'm getting trained in the spring on how to also do hypnotherapy as a modality, as for what I do. And hypnotherapy, you get very relaxed, and it helps to bring the subconscious mind to the forefront to help you process the barriers. So if you in most models of hypnotherapy, it's actually really emotionally intensive. When I've had it done, I bawled, I cried, because you have control over things. You can scratch your nose, you can open up your eyes and get up and walk out if you wanted. And it is such an intensely vulnerable and emotional experience. So hearing her say she did 2 hypnotherapy sessions, I wonder even how effective they were, because also if there is no buy-in, if you are not going into hypnotherapy fully willing to almost let yourself go and trust the process and allow whatever comes up to come up and process, like for you to process it, it's not going to be effective. So if she went for 2 hypnotherapy sessions, you talked about Ken too, and I even say it, I've heard people say, oh yeah, I went to therapy. That means fuck all if you're not actually doing anything with it. Same thing for hypnotherapy. It's a type of modality. If you're not going in there and fully embracing that experience, don't mean anything. And I do question how present she was for it. So,
I
yeah.
com- I completely agree.
Yeah.
Like, and also to your point, if hypnotherapy is particularly intense, brings up a lot of
Yeah.
emotion, it's like, well, hang on, what do we know Jill has been doing historically throughout this entire time? Oh, that's right, avoiding those emotions, pushing them down. And so, to me, when I hear this, I just sort of think it's very hypocritical and arrogant of Jill to be saying to Lucy, well, you should consider changing your career path of being a psychotherapist, when it's like, hang on a minute, Lucy, you've done over 6 years of therapy and you're training to be in this field. Yet,
Yeah.
ironically, this person you're seeing who's only done 2 sessions of hypnotherapy is trying to give you advice on what you need and how to handle yourself. I just think, no, like, even though I agree with what you're saying, Megan, that like going to therapy in theory means fuck all by itself, I do think that you, Lucy, have given a lot of thought, reflection to even this dynamic as it was playing out, and even being very conscientious of how you handled it, which does suggest to me the therapy has at least started to really work for you in terms of like, okay, I can see what's going on. I know how to handle myself. I'm trying to do things differently this time. Whereas I feel like for Jill, this is someone who's still at the age of 10, emotionally speaking, and it doesn't seem like they're coming out of that state anytime soon. So just returning to the last few parts of Lucy's letter, Lucy writes, all these things that I went through with Jill were the last straw for me. The next days, she just tried to keep a surface level communication until the last time we finally met. I was doing all the talking again and basically begged her to stay and work this out together, proposing we do it with the help of a couples therapist. I told her how I believed in her and her potential and all the good qualities I saw in her. I don't know how to do this, and it's not fair for you to wait for me to reach your level, is what she would reply. She later, however, found a way to mention our repeated issue of her perpetual lateness to stress how I was overreacting. No one ever told me that me being late makes them feel like I don't respect them or their time simply because I'm late. They accept me for who I am and go about their lives. We'll be returning to that point. Next day, Jill continued through text. I feel like a huge asshole and I'm crying about it because you're still here and you are supporting an asshole when you should have left months ago. I really can't understand how you believe in me even when I don't believe in my own self. Another point we'll return to. Actually, why don't we just go to it now? Because I feel like there's a lot of
Oh
meat
my God.
here. And I will say
Yeah.
we'll get to the bottom part of this experience very shortly. But yeah, I gotta say, my first 2 cents on this is I feel like one thing that's coming out of this, which I've seen across a lot of dismissive, leaning, fearful avoidance, and even fearful avoidance, is they know they're treating their partner terribly. Like, I think what's really awful is how they treat their partner horribly, and it's all self-sabotage because they
Yeah.
think that if you get to know the real them, you will reject them. So they're trying to preempt that feeling of rejection by getting rid of you
Yeah.
first. And I
Yes.
think that they can, like a narcissist, I think they actually do get to a point where they devalue you because they're like, well, if I can just treat you like this, what are you, codependent? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And they start to actually have real disrespect for you because they know they can treat you however they like. And I think that what's really interesting to me, to another point, is this unrealistic expectation that people just need to accept her for who she is, that, she can be late to a significant other and not expect to have any consequences for that because she's imposing on their time. And it's just like, you should just accept me for who I am. It's like, Jesus Christ, like, how old are you? But anyways, Megan, what are your thoughts?
I was gonna say that point of you should just accept me for who I am. Uh,
No.
a lesbian. I was gonna say we had that conversation on things like your sexuality, your race, your ability, things like that. That's what we can go, okay, that's what we should accept regardless. But things like you just gotta accept me because I'm late. No, no, no. Those are things. that you have to be aware of and respectful of. So what I hear, I wonder, nobody was able to respect her time and wants and needs. And like I said, parents were probably like, you know what, you're on your own. And she would just do that. She would show up whenever she wanted. Or somebody probably did say to her, you know what, you need to be on time. That is a sign of respect for me. And she didn't like it, so either she left or they stopped engaging with her because she just showed up when she felt like it. So that that is that's my thought with that. And hearing her talk about like, I can't, I'm not going to be at your level. You're going to have to wait around for me. If I understood that correctly, it goes back to she has some level of awareness of how she is showing up and behaving, and she is not willing or wanting to make changes. And Ken, I think it's oxymoronic because, like, I'll be honest, I have moments where I'm like, I don't even know what to make of this when you were saying that, they start to devalue you because they can just treat you however they want and you stay. That is just heartbreaking. Like, that is so sad. But also at the same time, why are you treating somebody that way? That's the question I have. Why are you treating somebody that way if you have some level of awareness of I don't respect this person, considering it's because of my own actions, not them, my actions. So I just, yeah, some of these things, it's it is really sad, and nobody deserves to be treated that way. Nobody.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think that when you take a step back and look at all this sort of stuff too, it's bullying behavior. Like, it's like, this person, Jill, is bullying Lucy, and there's no consequences for what Lucy's, doing. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
Lucy going off with a mysterious friend who, I've heard this play out in many ways where it's like they take the friend, make them the getaway partner who they want to be with, and they jump into a new relationship. And I've actually heard that play out, if I'm being completely honest, in so many LGBTQIA plus experiences where I'm sure it
Oh yeah.
happens to straight couples as well too. But I've heard so many gay and lesbian partners have, an FA partner who is lining up the getaway partner. And again, it's not like, for me, this is where things become very blurry, where it's like, are we dealing now with a personality disorder on top of all the fearful avoidance sort of stuff? Because it seems like, the initial discard was the first level of disrespect. And now we're suddenly getting to a stage where, they're inviting some friend to be with them on a holiday without actually disclosing who the friend is and what's going on. It's just like, Jesus Christ, how low can you go?
Yeah.
I have seen this play out sometimes in straight pairings, but I'll be
Yeah.
honest, there's a certain brutality that I see in alphabet soup land that is
Yeah.
uniquely brutal compared to what straight people go through.
And something I wonder too, and I also recognize, Lucy, you mentioned this earlier, talking about being a masculine woman. I'll be honest, I genuinely, I mean this, I have such respect for you. Being able to navigate the world presenting in a masculine way, that takes a lot of guts. Like, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. And when I see women who show up in that masculine way, that does take courage. And you also recognize you may not look like other people around you. And that itself, I have so many masculine lesbian friends or masculine presenting female friends who still talk about, this is how I feel comfortable, but I still can struggle with feeling fully accepted and wanted. And hearing that you felt like Jill was like embarrassed to be with you, that, like, my heart, like, it broke in a million pieces hearing that. And I genuinely believe this. I think it's going back to not because she was embarrassed by you, but it goes back to what about, I wonder about her shame with her own identity.
Yeah.
She's never really dated another female before. And, going back to she probably is so afraid to have you meet other people or get to know them, because in her mind, the relationship will inevitably end and she can't handle it. So to try to like not make the heartbreak so intense for her, she's not going to have you meet people, or she's not going to take you out in public. I do think it's not because of you being a masculine woman. I think it's because she just couldn't handle that intense heartbreak. And I do wonder how much shame she has. Like I don't know really any other person as part of the LGBTQ community who didn't feel shame at one time or who still struggles with it, whether they're out. Like, right? I felt like that for a long time too. It takes us time to come out, because that last step is who's going to walk out of my life and who's going to be okay. And every time I may have to out myself, am I going to be accepted?
Yeah.
And that like never, that can never end sometimes.
No, but I will say that pro tip for anyone who's part of the LGBT community, if you're serious about having a healthy relationship, don't date someone who's even slightly closeted. Like, just
Yeah.
don't. It's not because they don't deserve grace. It's not because they
Yeah.
don't have kindness and compassion for what they're going through, but they are not ready for a real relationship. They are
Yeah.
still in the dark, and the dark is what's comfy for them. Wonderful. But it just seems to me like Jill is insecure city right now in terms of what's going on. So anyways, let's wrap up Lucy's letter. So Lucy ends with,
Yeah.
this madness had to end, so I asked her to come pick her things up on the 2nd of July, where she mumbled something about WE, didn't make it, and the usual avoidant bullshit. It was a week shy of our 1 year anniversary, August 19th, the day that she came back from her second vacation. I get a phone text. She was blocked on everything else since we broke up, so no contact, saying how I'm on her mind in many different ways, but not in being together in a relationship again, that we tried it and we couldn't make it work, and continues in a nonchalant tone to say that she even thought we could remain friends with benefits, but she knew I'd probably say no, but she had to share it with me nonetheless. I wrote about together again in a relationship. We tried it, yes, but so we can call a spade, even though she couldn't make it work. Even now, it'd be decent to take some form of accountability for something, but Jill just wouldn't do it. Regarding friends with benefits, I'll only say that it shows me how Jill just had no idea of what we had, what she did, what she lost, and what's happening generally. Jill insulted herself by mentioning it. People like Jill hurt others without feeling anything and don't respect and consider others. They don't deserve to have access to people like Lucy's lives and all the positive things that they gave and gave and gave. And ultimately, Lucy said, please don't bother me ever again. I gotta tell you, I think Lucy's handling this like a fucking champ. So just around
Yes. Oh yeah.
Lucy ends with, after that, I found out that Jill met her friends every weekend, went to every concert and club in our area. She specifically told me this is something that doesn't suit her anymore, and posted stories at 2 and 6 in the morning. She never posted stories of us, and I don't mean me, but we visited such beautiful places, had mouth-watering food, watched amazing sunsets, but it was like she didn't even have these experiences with me, and it made me feel like they never even happened. So, rounding out, we got some questions. We have Lucy asking the question of, what the hell was I trying to save? Why don't people like me leave sooner? Okay, I'm going to just say, personally, the fawn response, and that's my very reductive and overly simplistic answer. What are your thoughts?
I was gonna say, it's when I hear like, why do people like us not leave? I Again, I know it's just written. I know we're not talking face to face, Lucy, but I hear an undertone of like, what's defective about me, or like, am I stupid enough to stay? And like none of that. The reason why is because what I hear is because for you, you felt like there was something in there that was worth it for
Yep.
you. You also, I hear how much you love and you cared about her. And that is, that was that reason for you to stay. And it goes back to, what I talked about earlier in this live is you you were operating from the best place with the knowledge that you had. You didn't realize, you didn't know that this was going to unravel the way that it did, this relationship. And, you know, again, I wonder what was your emotional connection that you had growing up? What's familiar to your nervous system?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, so you were there because that is what you knew. Now you know differently, but at the time that's the best of how you operated. And even folks that are, you know, fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant, or dismissive, or really anxious, anxious attachment, you know, they're, again, it's, you know, not saying it's okay, but they're also operating in the best way that they know how, even on those really extreme
Yep.
ends. um, but you're, you know, now that you know, what are you doing with this information? How are you wanting to change? What are you wanting to do for your next relationship? So that's where things are at. And, you know, you stayed because it mattered to you. And you can love. You were able to open up your heart and love
Yep.
her.
I completely agree. I agree with everything you said. Listen, Jill at the beginning wasn't, acting like this. Jill was
Yeah.
someone a little bit quirky. She felt safe to you. She felt like, this is someone who was actually really, really good to be around. So, you've got someone here, right? You have Jill, who's presented really well in spite of some quirks about wanting to not look in the past because that's oblivion to her. But for the most part, Jill's fun. Jill's great to be around. You have amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not discount the fact that, as you said, Megan, quite beautifully, and I love the way you were so empathetic, is you fell in love with her. And there is nothing wrong with that. But me offering a bit of love, this is where I need to say, be very careful as we are on the road out of anxious attachment land. And this is something I had to learn for myself, and I've had to learn it hard. We tend to not have boundaries for ourselves in that we give way too much to people and don't know when to stop. Because when we're in situations like this, which, by the way, are very subtle, so with all due respect to you, Lucy,
Yes.
it's not like the avoidant attachment was screaming at you when you first went into this. And as Megan has said repeatedly, you didn't know what you didn't know. So, you're very like, that's totally fine. But one thing I got to tell you is, I have had to learn, like, no more. I am not putting up with any form of behavior where there isn't consideration for the impact of how it affects me. And it is such a hard thing to unlearn because a lot of us, and I imagine you're like this too, Lucy, conscientious, understanding, empathic, probably very socially adept. You are someone where, even reading this letter, there's so much thoughtfulness in everything that you've written, and you sound like a very emotionally intelligent person. The danger is that whilst those gifts lead you to being incredibly socially gifted, it also might set you up where, and I've done this, and I'm still, I'm recovering from this, is it does lead us into positions where we take on way too much of other people's stuff. We also over empathize with people who are not at our level. And we end up sacrificing so much of ourselves to try and please people who, in ways, are just as emotionally unavailable as some people from our past without even realizing it. So it's why I think that the road out of this is really learning to curtail that desire to try and lean into these quirky people and actually find people who can give back to us. Because here's the thing. I think a lot of people who come to my page, frankly, would be gifted therapists. I think a lot of you have such tremendous empathy, but I'm quite ruthless with my empathy, and I don't give it out to everyone anymore. I'm like, no, either you're paying for it, you're a close friend, a lover, a family member, or that's it. Because we cannot be on tap for everybody. It's unhealthy, it's not okay, so don't do it. So anyways, that being said, that's a very advanced sort of step. But I think that, just for now, as Megan was saying, you didn't know what you didn't know. And you need to also sit with the fact that this shit is devastating.
Yes, that's another thing too. Whatever, if you have any embarrassment, shame, why didn't I know better? All stuff that's going to start coming up for you. You didn't know what you didn't know, but now you are equipped for the future. You have some understanding of, all right, I know some things I need to keep an eye out for in my next relationship. So yeah, yeah.
And I can see here we've actually got a few other questions to go with this as well too. One that I think a lot of people would probably in the chat will appreciate. What can we do to feel more confident in the future when we choose a partner that won't be severely avoidant or emotionally unavailable? And that's like the $1,000,000 question.
I know, and it's a complex question. If it was so easy, I think all of us would be richer than the Monopoly man at this point, right? Like just hand it out, just money, money, money. So, um, it's a tough question, but because I know Ken, you've talked about it. Even other like the dating decoder, like there's other really, really good um like Instagram influencers on there that are like really legit and they're ethical in what they offer, where they talk about you really may not know because it's subtle. It is so subtle. So you really may not know until you really start to date and get into that relationship. But if this person stays really surface level, they can't really introspect their own feelings. But if they can't really provide elaborations on how they showed up in previous relationships, if they can't really tell you how they cope with their own emotions or how they've handled really challenging experiences like maybe grief, loss, um, having, devastating things in their life where they've had to start over in some ways, or just feeling like they may have not met their goals. If they can't really go into deep detail, you can hear a lot of introspection and thought on it, that's a red flag. That's a big red flag for
I
me.
agree. And I want to also say be fucking careful of the reverse when you get the trauma dumping fearful avoidance, because there is
Yes.
a very, very bad tendency for fearful avoidance to just be like, oh, all this stuff happened to my family and my life. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I didn't agree to a therapy session on a date. It's one of those things where I find that for a lot of avoidant attachers, as one person here said, they don't give good reasons as to why previous relationships ended. I completely agree. As I said on a live many years ago, details about their past relationships, colorless. It's almost like it's lacking in finer detail and nuance. It's just, we weren't compatible. Now, here's the rub. Compatibility reasons do exist. They're very real and we should think about them. But the thing that's also very off-putting about those explanations of, oh yeah, we were just incompatible. If you hear that from someone who just ended a relationship, it may fill you with a degree of confidence. They sound like they're over it. They sound like they've healed and they're ready for a new relationship. They're not emotionally tied up in this anymore. And in theory, that would be correct. But the problem is that we don't often have the devil in the detail, which is why did it actually come down to a compatibility reason? And
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to be playing Sherlock Holmes on the first couple of days, but this is where due diligence is really bloody important, when you go into dating as well too, which is, I actually think the more you feel safe being emotionally expressive, the more you actually challenge some of their stuff, you'll find that these people start to flee because they can't handle it. I actually had a chat with someone yesterday who identifies with a fearful avoidant attachment style, and I use this example on a story, and so I'll share it here for everyone because it's actually kind of relevant. Um, I was saying to them something to the effect of like, hey, I really like what you're doing. I think you're doing a great job. And they were like, oh, thanks. It's been really hard for me this week. And I was like, tough week, question mark. And they were like, oh yeah, I've been feeling overwhelmed lately and it's been really hard. I kid you not. I had a part of me that was like, oh, I want to be like, there. I'm sure it's really hard for you with what you're going on through right now. Everything will be fine. That's the fawn response. And I had to quickly backtrack and be like, and I actually said to this person, I'm like, are you having an avoidant moment? And they were like, yes, I am. And then proceeded to sort of explain to me what's going on. And I thought, great. And in my head, my brain immediately went, I think think that honestly, the self-awareness is amazing, but the fact that you couldn't even express that level of emotion with me without me prompting for that meant we are at two such different levels, because you are still in that space of wounding where you feel like you can't even disclose that information to me without having, the need to protect yourself, fearing that if you share that, you're going to burden me. So that's another example where it's like, look, I don't want to have to go out of my way to find out how you're feeling if you can't tell me that, because then I'm like, what am I, your therapist? So I'm sharing that as an example to say this stuff is insidious, and it's very easy to feel like you have to tiptoe around these individuals. But if you can recognize when that fear inside of you is building to tiptoe, the best thing you can do is to realize I'm starting to enter into trauma bond territory.
Yes, another thing too I want to add, I'm going to call this a spicy hot take when we talk about like trust your gut. So I metaphorically pull my hair out when I see on Instagram some dating coaches or even some therapists go, you just trust your gut, trust your gut. But the problem is that if you are somebody who has grown up experiencing such relational trauma, that includes neglect. If you were emotionally neglected, you did not have emotional needs met. So maybe emotionally things were not volatile for you, but if you just never had anybody emotionally show up for you, your gut is not really in tune. Your inner compass isn't fully in tune or aligned. So when right, it's north is not north. North is like southeast. It's all just all over the place. So when you see like content and dating coaches or whoever talking about it, have some distraction. Apart, like I'm not a trauma therapist. Like I'm not trained in a specific trauma modality, but my workday consists of people who have so much trauma and so much relational trauma that you talk about the theories and you help to unpack. I do help to unpack that work with them. So if your history of dating experience is constantly with people that are you know fearful, avoidant, dismissive, anxious, and you always, kind of walk out feeling emotionally hollow or not, not fulfilled. If this is a pattern for you, that's to step back and go, okay, so when I go and date, this is my type or this is someone I gravitate towards. I need to maybe start dating people who actually make me feel maybe a little bit different and maybe slightly uncomfortable. And not to say anxiety inducing, that's not what we want, but just to go, this feels a little bit unfamiliar. If they are not, this person is consistent, so their actions and their words are aligning. They have not, they are including me in things. They're regularly reaching out and wanting to connect and engage. They're wanting me to meet people. They're not rushing the process. They're not rushing putting labels on things or taking trips 2 months in. Like I know we talk about, at least with like lesbians, if dates were an Olympic sport, I think we would take all the gold medals, because the big joke is that
Yeah.
like, a lesbian date lasts for 3 days. Like that's a short date.
I
So
will say
even things like that,
this would come close second, in my opinion, as
right?
well, too.
Yeah, I'm like, no, you know what? I've had my fill of like 72-hour dates. It's like, and it never pans out well. Um, so just not rushing the process, but really kind of going, okay, this person is kind, they're consistent, they're really showing interest in me. There's no rushing the process. If that feels a little bit slightly uncomfortable in your body, like an unfamiliar uncomfortable, that's what we want to lean into. If you're meeting something and again, your nervous system, because our nervous system is what tells us what feels safe, even if it's not, if that feels so calm and you're like, this is familiar, that's when we have some, that's when we have to have some of our own little, bells and whistles going off, going, I need to monitor this. This is maybe not somebody for me. I know that was a bit of a rant,
No, no,
but
that's
that
great.
is really, really important. So don't trust your gut. Don't look at that content if you don't have great experiences with relationships, whether or not they're intimate.
I 100% agree. And I'm also
Yeah.
going to say something that I haven't said before, which is be very careful of content that's advertising how to have a relationship with avoidant attachers. Not,
Yeah, don't
not
do
to
it.
say that it can't be done, but
Yeah.
be very mindful because some people, particularly some coaches here on social media, have a tendency to almost downplay the severity of these experiences. And worse, they'll say things to you like, you need to learn how to create emotional safety for your avoidant partner. It's like, no, 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 that ain't our job. Like, and this is where I would actually use what Jill was saying in response to this, which is actually for those of us that are bloody good at providing space for people and safety, I'd say, please do the opposite. Do less because this is a stranger at the end of the day. You don't
Yep.
know. Let them earn that capacity and emotion from you and that warmth and that empathy, and let them say to you, hey, this is what I need for safety. Because if you're guessing and trying to figure it out like there's some stray cat that's not able to function properly because of understandable stuff that's happened to them, it ain't your job to be the vet. You've really got to remember at the end of the day that we're not dealing with, stray animals here. We're dealing with human beings. And human beings need to communicate and also articulate their boundaries, what they have, what they with. And so I get worried, particularly, and if I'm going to be very explicit, when accounts like Anxious Hearts Guides say stuff which I think is actually very much in the realm of enabling. And so even though I don't think she particularly, Ricky, means badly, I worry when accounts like that have a tendency to basically make it seem like everything is just a matter of bending over backwards and turning yourself into a beachside deck chair for your other partner. It's like you're already way too good at that, and that's a quick fast track to burnout. And hell, there have been books written about this for years. Go read Women Who Love Too Much, because that is exactly what that is.
Yes, exactly. And that also is reinforcing the narrative. We hear it more if we tend to lean more anxious of, I will not be loved unless I earn it. So let me go chase the emotionally unavailable person. And by doing that, I got to turn myself into a pretzel, fold like a beachside deck chair, like just you become like an acrobat to try and have this person show up for you when they won't. And then it can, again, this is really what I see it as, is that they may appear to show up for you, but it's not that they're really showing up, is that you have walked away from yourself, your own wants, needs, things that bring you joy, what you really want in that relationship emotionally to feel fulfilled. You walked away from that to please somebody else. That is screaming that anxious attachment.
Yep.
So yeah, if it says you, how to see, what I've even seen one where it's like, what fearful avoidance are secretly wanting from you? That, avoid that. Don't do it. Don't look at it. That content sucks. It's toxic. It is encouraging people to stay in their unhelpful and toxic patterns. Don't do it.
It's not your job to figure out what they need. It's their job
No,
to tell you what they need. And it's
exactly.
because otherwise we end up having the same experience of being codependent with this, and it just leads us nowhere. Now, I have to say, I have seen some really phenomenal comments talking about signs that you're potentially dating an avoidant attacher. And I thought I'd just summarize some of them really quickly. And then I think we'll round out because I got to get on with my day. I don't know, you've got to get on with your night.
Yes.
So just to round out some really quick fire ones, I see some people have mentioned things like you got to be really careful of avoidant attachers because they tend to project the perfect image on social media. Absolutely. They tend to hoard their exes. They tend to also be very uncommittal in the early stages. When you say like, hey, can we make a relationship out of this? They're often very hesitant in spite of how seemingly eager they are to continue investing time with you.
Yeah.
They also struggle to really introspect with their own deep emotions and feelings about certain things. And I think you've got to be really careful because I work with a lot of avoidant clients on this, but I'm going to tell you now, they are masters of impression management. Be bloody careful with the fact that how glossy they show up. They can look like, oh my God, if I get this person, it's like having the school jock that I never got with when I was a high schooler. They look like the cool girl who I've always wanted to be with. Get your ego out of this. Be very careful that you're not seeking vanity where there's no emotional availability.
100%. I think you talked about it, Ken, in previous content you've created, but it's like there's a hurricane going on. And I know we've talked about it when they come into our office for a session.
Yes.
They look like, right, super cool, calm, collected, but you can like see it in their face, you can hear it in their voice, and their body language will change. Or when we try to engage of like, how are you today? I'm okay. Or, for me, it's, how has your use been? Or what's going on, with your relationship? What are we needing to work on today? Everything's okay. Or like, oh, it was, yeah, we're just very vague. And you're like, nope, and we have to call it out. I can actually see how anxious you are.
Yeah.
And sometimes they recognize it, or sometimes they're like, it's very sincere. Oh, that's what's going on. I didn't realize it. I can't I can't put language to my experience. So I know that we can spend time helping somebody who's connecting with themselves to put language to their own internal experiences.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I also saw one which is like the classic red flag line for me. And I know in the moment it seems great, but I'm just here to say if you ever hear someone say, I never felt this way about anyone before,
Yeah.
you know, I've never had an experience of feeling so safe with anyone. All my previous exes were toxic, this, that, or the other. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but even though that is a glowing compliment, pat yourself on the back, you're doing great. It would be arrogant to assume that you can, like, that's going to necessarily mean they are ready for what you are offering. Because if all they've known is toxicity and they're telling you that in a euphoric state, it's probably like literally minutes before the end of this entire experience. Your honeymoon phase is about to come to a rapid end.
Hmm. And you said it, Ken. It's like it would be like us going, here's $1 million. Here
Yes.
you go. And that's really us going, here is a piece of my heart. Please be kind and caring for it. And they go, oh, wow. Bloop, and they just like drop it. It's not intentional. Again, this goes back to this is not intentional. I hope I didn't come across as being too harsh to those who are struggling with their insecure attachment.
No.
But it's like, right, some of these, it's the reality of they kind of have your hand, they go, oh, okay, and they just drop it and they walk away because they don't know what to do with it. They have no idea. And it's because that wasn't given to them.
Yeah.
They like that, how to be loved and cared for. So exactly. I remember the first time I heard that, I went, oh, you kind of go, oh, I must be someone special. Like it was like, oh, this is so nice. And then it was like a nuclear bomb went off of like, you're just, no, you actually suck, you're awful and all these things. And you step back and you went, what happened to like, I you know you've never felt so safe and cared for. It's because they don't know what to do. That's like us giving you $1 million. People who win the lottery, so many of them will end up bankruptcy, just their whole lives blow up. I see so many people who will obtain thousands upon thousands of dollars with their gambling addiction in one go, and then they'll blow it actively in their addiction, and they go, yeah, I had someone was a trust fund baby. Millions of dollars are gone because they don't know what to do with it. Also, that addiction is a part of it too, but communicating with them, they said, you know what, I think even if I didn't have this case, this gambling addiction, I don't know, I wouldn't know what to do with all this money. So it's kind of that idea with love and care, and actually being wanting wanting to see and love and care for somebody.
Yep.
So yeah.
I completely agree with everything you've said. As someone who has had to get better with my relationship with money, I can assure you that when you can't handle $100, you will never be able to handle $1 million.
Yes.
And it's one of those things
Yes.
where this is gonna, be a shock to people who love the high value nonsense. It's like, how can you possibly respect something of objective value if you're not comfortable with said value? If you've got imposter syndrome, think, oh God, I can't handle this because I'm worried I'm gonna lose it. What are you gonna do? Oh, that's right, you're gonna find every possible way to self-sabotage and get rid of that source of anxiety because you're like, I can't handle it. So naturally, you go from being a millionaire back to being as broke as you were before you won the lottery. And so I think that's why it's really, really important for people to understand that, yes, none of this is personal. It's all self-esteem related stuff. But
Yeah.
your vitality, your empathy, your understanding cannot raise the dead from people who've only ever known toxicity and dysfunctionality without wanting to work on that stuff for themselves too. It's simply, they're not going to be ready for the value that you bring to the table.
Exactly. It's like, love and kindness. And the more you show it, think of it like, this is a foreign language. You are speaking Spanish, and someone who you are trying to give that love to, they may go, oh yeah, like I know a couple of Spanish words. And then when you try to hold a conversation with them in this foreign language, they go, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And they just like, nope, I'm done. Never mind. Let's go. I can't do this. Go back to a language we're both familiar with. And for them, it's void, not being able to give or reciprocate that. I don't know if that was a bad comparison, but I've explained it that way to people too. It literally is like, it's a different language, it's a different skill set. It's like, you're an Olympic, you talked about, you're an Olympic tennis player, and they're just trying to figure out how to hit the ball with the racket. It's two different levels. And that's another reason why too, if, can you talk about if someone is not at that level with you emotionally, it's not going to work. And it's not because you are doing something right or wrong. And also, it's not because they're doing something right or wrong in that aspect. You are just at two different levels. And and having to wait around for that, that's having for you to wait around to feel whole and to feel valued in a relationship. And that's not something I encourage anybody to do. So it's, again, even folks listening, if you feel like I'm defective or I can't do this, you absolutely can. And you start somewhere, you will get to that point. Ken and I agree, we see it all the time. I have people that I support where, in the space with Ken, let's help you to be more secure and more loving. And when I have people come into my office for their own mental health and addiction reasons, that's huge. I need to become more emotionally intelligent and available so I can feel whole and I can connect with people that are going to help me to thrive and to help me to meet my recovery goals and to live a healthy life. We all start somewhere, and it's going to take time. People like me and Ken, there are resources available. So even those who are listening, I promise I wouldn't be saying if it wasn't true. Ken wouldn't be making this content if it wasn't accurate. There is help out there for you. There's help.
Yeah, 100 billion%. And my last piece before I bounce is,
Yeah.
I want to urge people to understand, I really hope that you learn that your empathy and your kindness, compassion is a gift, and it is not meant
Yes.
for everyone. And even though we can be amazing at understanding the trauma of what a lot of these people have gone through, we want to help them open up. Please understand, I would encourage, particularly this segment of the world who are particularly overly empathic, to actually build up a degree of healthy narcissism and ruthlessness, which is, you simply cannot give that kindness and generosity to people who are not working on their stuff. We've all gone through degrees of mental health and traumatic experiences to one shape or another. But just because someone's gone through trauma doesn't excuse them to behave badly. And you need to be with people who are at a similar emotional and psychological level to you. Those people deserve help, but it ain't going to be you. They need professionals. And unless you're paid to work for them, opt out.
Yep, exactly. And people that are deeply empathetic, research is kind of, It's kind of up and down. But when I hear people say, I'm an
Oh,
empath, I say this, I was going to say, I'm going to say this very kindly and lovingly. Nope, you are incredibly hypervigilant. You may have never been, physically abused, sexually abused. You maybe never experienced what we're going to call big T traumas, but you're not really empathetic. You are highly, highly vigilant. That is a trauma response. That shows up as fawning. That shows up as I have to be so aware and care for other people's emotions, because I was also never told to be okay
yep,
with mine, right? We talk about the anxious people, people with that anxious attachment. That's where we can kind of think of the empaths. They lean there. But when we do that, we are also actually walking away from our own emotions, just like someone who's dismissive. It looks different, but we are also not sitting with our emotions because we're so concerned about other people. So when we talk about if you go, I'm an empath, I want you to think about how much do you pay attention to other people's words, the energy, what they're feeling? Do you feel like you're obligated to support them? And if you are matching, if you feel like you are absorbing or taking in that energy, that's not being empathetic. That is you. It's a reliving out trauma. You are trying to cope and stay safe in that environment. So you are trying to show up to people. That's what that looks like. So,
yep.
and a huge part of healing is working on this person is struggling with their own stuff. If I caused it, that's a different conversation. But if they are struggling with their own stuff, I can feel that emotional charge and that energy. I I have to have boundaries, and like I have to have boundaries. What is it I can and can't do for them? What's the context of this interaction I'm having with them?
Yep.
What do I need to do? But that starts with us being able to step back and go, I can, maybe I can feel how they're feeling, but what do I need to feel safe and sane and whole? And that's a huge part of healing too.
I
So
completely agree. So just as we're rounding out today, thank you
yes.
everyone for joining. And once again, I've seen this happen a few times in my life, and I laugh when it happens. I feel like the chat was having group therapy, which was hilarious. So thank
Yeah.
thank you to everyone who participated in this live, and I hope that you guys had a great time.
Yeah.
And um, I just as a reminder, so Megan's part of the team. If you would like to book in a session with Megan, feel free to go and check out her availability in the link in my bio. But we will be back again for future content down the line. And yeah, Megan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And yeah, if you are wanting to connect with me for services, reach out. I have space for clarity calls. I have space to take on clients. I love what I do. I wanted to work with Ken. Ken supported me in my own healing, and being able to give that back. So I know what it's like to be in your shoes. And yeah, if you have questions, we can connect. But yeah, it was great. I love what I do, addiction work, attachment work. This always brings me joy. So thank you so much for having me, Ken.
No, you're very welcome. It was great having you here to formally introduce you and also to share you as well too. All right, everybody, thank you. I'll be back for another live next week for another Ken Reads episode, and I hope that everyone is taking care of themselves out there in this interesting space of dating and relationships. All right, bye
All
everyone.
right. Bye, guys.